the Tibetan culture has lasted so long because of its alignment with the truth. And it's flexible enough to accommodate the present and all of technology, and it's prescient enough to consider the future in an open and honest way. This piece of paper is completely, if you have to start with this.
Hello and Tashlek. Welcome to Tibetan with Norbu. I'm Norbu. In today's video, I'm excited to have a short chat with one of my students, Victor. He will be sharing his Tibetan learning journey, talking about what inspired him, some of the challenges he has faced, and how he overcome them. Plus, he will be offer a few handy tips and tricks for fellow Tibetan learners. So stay tuned and enjoy the journey of learning Tibetan language. Tashlek Victor la.
Tashi Deleno.
Kailangan tevo impe.
Ah, na defoyin. Kailangan defoyin pay.
Ngayang tevoin. Tujiche. All right, Victoria. First of all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to have short interview with you regarding your Tibetan learning journey. Since you have been learning Tibetan with me for quite a long time, right? And I really appreciate your dedication for learning Tibetan. Now you actually, even though you start just few years ago, you can read in Tibetan script. You actually hold basic conversation as well, which is really amazing. So in today's conversation, I would like to talk about your Tibetan learning journey. So I want to ask you a few questions about your learning
Sure.
journey. So first question I want to ask is like, what inspired you to learn Tibetan?
Several things, actually. Tibetan has been hanging around with me since childhood. And for reasons I can't tell you, I remember, I think I told you this story once, but when I was about 7 years old,
Hmm.
um, my mother and I were kind of close, and I had a big map in my room, and somehow or other, I got news that China had invaded Tibet. My first sort of identification with the world and maps and my whole concept of, how the world worked. And somehow
Hmm.
or other, this event triggered my uh, interest in the world in a big way. And of course, I was very sympathetic. And of course, as a young person, I didn't know why one country would want to invade another. So naturally, I took the
Okay.
Tibetan side of things.
All right.
But
Mm-hmm.
but as time progressed, I'm a child of the 60s, and the Tibetan culture was kind of part of the 60s psychedelia revolution, where people wanted to understand the Eastern philosophies
Hmm.
and that type of thing. And I was part of that, and I actually went to India in my 20s,
Oh,
but I didn't make it to Tibet. Of course, it was closed, but I did go to Sri Lanka, and I did absorb the basic Eastern cultural mindset, which I could sum up like this.
all right. Wonderful. That's so inspiring. Yes. And
Yeah,
Victor, so during your journey, what challenges did you face in learning Tibetan journey and how did you overcome those challenges?
The biggest challenge that I had was that it was the language itself was completely unfamiliar. I had a
Mhm.
reasonable background in the culture, which I should say to your students that without a cultural context, the language seems really empty. I don't know why somebody would want to study Tibetan without the language without understanding the culture. So I
Mhm.
did understand the culture and, had in previously read through books like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and had practiced meditation. And, I'm well traveled,
Okay.
unlike a lot of your younger students. So, but the difficulty with Tibetan is that all the characters are completely different. The alphabet is completely different. So
Yes.
that's where I had to start. And the nice thing about Norbu was that he allowed me to kind of stay in the present, keep my interest going. Why we talked about everything else same at the same time, which just
True.
kept me interested because the reality is that learning the characters is difficult, and then learning the pronunciations is difficult, and it requires a lot of repetition.
Mm.
And for me personally, it wasn't as difficult because I've trained as a musician, so I'm used to
Mm.
repetition and
Okay.
and sounds, and so that really helped me. So anybody who's a musician will find it easier, I think, to learn the language because of that.
Exactly. Wonderful. And Victoria, would you like to share some tricks and tips for Tibetan as a second language learners, like any
Uh,
resources or anything
yes, yeah.
which could make their Tibetan learning journey easier?
Yes, the basic thing that Norbu and I did, that Norbu did for me when I started, was resulted in being able to print out the alphabet
Oh
like
yes,
this.
I do remember.
And this piece of paper is completely, if you have to start with this because it tells you if you don't understand this, you're never going to get past it. You're never going to get anywhere. So I would say start with this and just repeat it to yourself over and over again. And because you have to have familiarity with the basic
Mhm.
alphabet in order to do anything. So that's the after that, then there's other things you could do, but that's for really for the starters.
Mhm.
That's what I recommend. Uh, and
Wonderful.
Norberg, of course, gave me some other learning tools. They've got these little flashcards
Oh yes.
where, and it's kind of fun. Just ways to remember different
Mm.
characters and stuff. I don't know, does that answer the question or
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think you also have, do you have that one where we learn the
oh
superscript
the
and subscript? Did you
oh
print it
yeah,
out?
yeah. So if you get the first alphabet, then it starts. It was a little bit of a trick that he did, but I'm glad he did it. There's 26 in English. There's I don't know 22 in Hebrew. I don't know. It didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like 5,000 like there are in Chinese or something or 50,000. I don't know. So anyhow, and then he told me the truth that there's really not 28. There's more like 300, but there are variations on the 28 where they stack them
Wonderful.
up on each other, and then
Yes,
so
exactly.
I had to create this little composite, which I use all the time. All the time when I'm
Wonderful.
reading,
Wonderful.
I say, okay, which was that, a ta or a da? And there's I want to tell your students something that I don't know if you've ever done, but when I first started, I went, wait a minute, how many ways are there to say da?
Exactly.
There's 13.
Oh
There's
my God.
13.
Did you count
So
one by one?
there's really, excuse me, there's 13 ways to say da. So, and it all matters. It's a tricky language, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm getting the hang of it.
Wonderful. Victoria, now what do you think about Tibetan language? Why do you think that why Tibetan language and culture is important in this era and why people should learn Tibetan and its culture? What do you think the benefits of learning this language and the culture as well?
Well, that's a loaded question for me, Norbu, because I come from the age of the 60s where protest and was invented, really, social. So one basic motivation that I have for learning Tibetan is that China doesn't want me to. And and it's kind of an underdog mentality. And it just seems very, globally, it's just like there's just doesn't seem any reason, any legitimate reason for it. So I'm already emotionally and culturally on the side of like this is wrong, so I want to be on the right side of that. So that's a little bit of motivation, but the real why Tibetan and not some of the other cultures that are also under, assault from other bigger, powers. But Tibetan has, yeah, I find Tibetan to be a distillation of both Chinese and Indian wisdom and culture. And it's
Mhm.
sort of a crossroads. And it's interesting to see where those crossroads meet. I'm well read in Western literature and stuff, and I
Mhm.
have some knowledge of Eastern, but I think that a person interested in literature and are interested in learning and cultures will realize that Tibet stands at kind of a crossroads, and studying Tibetan gives you a vision of a lot of the world.
Mhm. Okay. All right, Victoria. Now I only have one last question. Would you like to share anything with my audience as well as my students who actually are learning Tibetan right now, Tibetan as a second language? So, would you like to share anything from your side?
Yes, yes. I would like to say thank you. Thank you for learning it. And it will pay you dividends because the people who are interested in learning Tibetan are also interested in the climate of the world because the Tibetan plateau is the water source for much of the world, and it's a source of right thinking and right
Mhm.
action, and it will align you with the right principles of the world just from learning the culture because it just resonates with a lot of universal truths, and it's the Tibetan culture has lasted so long because of its alignment with the truth, and it's flexible enough to accommodate the present and all of technology, and it's prescient enough to consider the future in an open and honest way. So I think it's a gateway to good thinking and right action. And, I'm not a Buddhist, but I practice a lot of the Buddhist traditions and in the way, and I think it's a reinforcement of my faith and my worldview. And I think it's a positive one.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm sure that it will gonna help for lots of students and lots of people who are actually willing to learn Tibetan. Okay, so thank you, Victoria, for giving me this time, and we will continue our Tibetan learning journey. So, all
Okay.
right, Tujie che
Uh,
Victor,
Thích Chê, Chê
yes,
Chê Yong.
Jela Jeyong.